Okay, so this is a look at the eventual hologram effect that I used. So the hologram here was eventually used for the character of Doc. I visualized this in Photoshop, took it into After Effects, animated some of them, built some more of these like widgets. For example, this here, which is just a waveform put in a circle with some time code in the middle, but it looks quite effective. So I then took that, pre-comped it, put it in here, added like a wave warp, layered it up with different effects, added a fisheye effect so it looks a bit more realistic, and then it was just a job of taking both this and Mike's hologram and putting it into each individual shot that it needed, which took some time. So it was just tracking the shot, matching the holograms to the shot, angling them so they looked realistic for the shot. I also added a sort of reflection keyboard for the Doc character, which was just done the same way, and then I just had to went through and masked out his hand, so it looked a bit odd with half his fingers being blue. Okay, so this is going to be a brief effect breakdown of this odd looking hand hologram thingy. So I just took an arrow, generated this green looking glitchy background. I then took my footage, tracked the arrow to it, just using the built-in track motion, and then it's just a job of rotating out the hand, applying this to these layers here, which did the hand glitching in and glitching out. And then once I had color corrected and color graded, came up with this weird looking effect. It didn't come out as much as I wanted to. I wanted it more as a projection. However, with limited time and computer power, this is just what I came up with. Okay, so this is just going to be a brief effect breakdown, and I'm just going to build up all the layers that I used for this UFO shot. So I started off with the base layer of just the actor looking up at the sky. I then took my UFO model. I originally wanted to use a model from Blender, which I had hopefully modelled, and then animate it in 3D Studio Max, which you can get free as a student, which was good. And I had to go with that. However, After Effects isn't a 3D compositing software in itself, and so you couldn't take this these layers in After Effects and the plugin. So I ended up just using this 3D model, put it into Photoshop using the 3D features you've got in there, and then importing it into After Effects, which means in Photoshop I can still change its perspective and stuff. However, kept it as a 2D layer in After Effects. I then added just this blue line moving across the images to add a bit more realism to this UFO, although it does look quite fake and rubbery and just doesn't reflect well with the light. So I took that, added the UFO in. The next thing I did was add in the shadow for the UFO, which I had sort of expanding in as the image, as the UFO sort of suggested it moves down. I then wanted to move on to making the tractor beam, which comes out of the UFO. So I just duplicated the footage, the base footage, and just masked around it and made it really bright. So that worked quite well. So it also affected Mike, of course, as he was in that video layer. It was then just adding a little shadow to that, and then just adding some lens flares, making the image darker and darker again. And then I also added this tree layer here on the right hand side when it loads. Which I did basically because these trees here, I started rotoing them and putting them in front of the UFO. However, I just didn't feel it looked very realistic to do with the perspective of the image. So I added this as I wanted something in front of the UFO between the camera, just so it didn't look totally put on top. It was then just the way of I added smoke layers to the UFO, and then it was just adding huge lens flare, which I had increased in brightness massively when the tractor beam first come on, as if the camera couldn't respond that well to the volume of light. And then it was just a job of adding a final sort of slight fisheye effect to the image using an adjustment layer, which I just felt brought the whole composition closer to the audience as such. I then throughout editing also just kept turning on and turning off the aspect ratio bars that I chose, just so I keep knowing the size of the image that I would be working with. And that's the breakdown of this UFO angle. Thank you. Okay, so this is a much quicker look at the second angle of the UFO. So this was a lot simpler to do than the other one. The only major issue was the fact that the footage I used, that I shot, wasn't the greatest, as we had loads of trees which overlapped in his shoulder and some power lines there. So I just masked them out, and then it was just using a luma key to remove that and to create our white background. I then just added some smoke assets in front of and behind Mike just to even out the white, and then it was just the idea of adding the UFO, adding lots of brightnesses and lens flares. I then used an adjustment layer with the wiggle armor effect on it, just so the whole composition was moving around, which I felt added a bit more realism. And again, working with and without the aspect ratio bars that I chose, because I ended up moving the image of Mike up, which is covered by the bars, of course. So yeah, that is a quick breakdown of the effect. Thank you.